In Rome, justice began with a parade and ended with a knife. She was stripped, walked through the streets as if shame could wash the city clean. The law called it purification. But the ledgers show profit. Guards paid, vendors fed, spectators counted. Her body was the receipt for order. Who decided that humiliation could be sacred? The chronicles call it justice. The stones call it business. If you value evidence, subscribe. When the ledger closes, the bones still speak. The sun rose over the forum like a witness summoned to court. Doors opened, not to greet a new day, but to perform it. A woman, her hair shorn to mark her guilt, was led through the city by a chain polished bright for reflection. The guards walked in rhythm, not to hurry, but to pace the lesson. Every stop was measured, past the temple where she once prayed, beneath balconies where she was once called by name, through markets that priced olive oil beside gossip. Each pause widened the circle of witnesses. Children stared, elders looked down, merchants kept their scales steady, because seeing was participation. Shame was not accidental. It was engineered, taxed, and rehearsed. Rome turned pain into pedagogy, spectacle into civic order. Her footsteps echoed not only on stone, but through statute. The Lex Cornelia prescribed public exposure for the unchaste and the treasonous, as if humiliation could restore cosmic balance. To disobey the moral code was to break the city's contract with its gods, and the debt had to be paid in visibility. The route itself was mapped by moral accountants. Tablets from archives list street corners where sentences were read aloud, ensuring maximum exposure to traders, pilgrims, and soldiers on leave. Justice had a timetable: dawn for arrests, noon for parades, sunset for disposal. The hours coincided with market peaks because punishment worked best when folded into commerce. Every coin exchanged beside her path was a quiet vote for order. Rome's economy did not pause for pity, it synchronized with it. The herald's voice rose above the murmuring crowd. This woman has defiled herself and the peace of Rome. No evidence was offered, none was needed. The ritual itself was proof. By walking the condemned body through the city, the state reminded its citizens that law was not a shield, it was choreography. Every turn of the chain, every sob swallowed by noise, renewed the illusion that Rome was pure, because someone else was dirty. She was paraded, not because of what she had done, but because the city needed to see itself untainted. The spectators were not voyeurs. They were jurors in a trial of reassurance. If they flinched, order trembled. If they laughed, the empire was stable again. When she stumbled, the guard tightened the chain. The correction was immediate. The state would not allow even despair to interrupt the program. In this choreography, mercy was off script. Sometimes a hand extended from the crowd, a gesture of compassion, a cup of water. The law forbade it. Any citizen who aided the condemned was guilty of obstructing justice. Even empathy could be prosecuted. By criminalizing pity, the state converted silence into civic duty. Their restraint became obedience. Their passivity became faith. By dusk, the procession reached its terminus, the amphitheater. What had begun as law would now end as ceremony. The condemned were purified by blood. To the priest, her body was pollution contained. To the audience, it was entertainment disciplined by moral language. To the treasury, it was expenditure already justified. The knife descended, but the true incision was legal. Pain was not random. It was structured, scheduled, funded. Every cruelty had its ledger line: cost of beasts, wages for keepers, oil for torches. The spectacle was not chaos. It was administration. As the crowd roared, Rome congratulated itself for proving that sin had a price, and through her suffering, the city had balanced its accounts. We like to imagine cruelty as loss of control. Rome teaches the opposite. Cruelty was control refined. The big question remains: how does power convince a city that pain is purification and obedience is virtue? To answer, we follow the route from the street to the sand, from law to logistics, from spectatorship to complicity. The amphitheater was not chaos. It was a machine. The Romans called it damnatio ad bestias, condemnation to the beasts. Behind the Latin grace lay an industrial workflow of death. Each show began weeks earlier, in offices where clerks recorded names, offences, and expenses. A lion from Numidia cost 6,000 sesterces. A criminal sentenced to the beasts cost nothing. The arithmetic balanced beautifully. Ships from Africa carried sand selected for contrast, pale enough to highlight blood, coarse enough to grip flesh. Inspectors tested texture by running it through their fingers. Senators debated its hue in letters. The arena's beauty depended on invisible bureaucrats. Every cruelty had a clerk. The state required emotion as revenue. Fear and awe stabilized loyalty more efficiently than bread. Emperors understood the calculus. Feed the people's stomachs with grain, their conscience with spectacle. Procurement agents contracted beast traders, carpenters built traps, musicians rehearsed cues. Every roar was an invoice paid in obedience. Archaeologists find traces of this bookkeeping. Clay tablets listing wages for animal handlers, fines for late arrivals, memos on blood drainage. This was not madness. It was a bureaucracy of terror. The amphitheater turned cruelty into labor and labor into civic identity. Even the seating map encoded hierarchy. Senators near the sand, plebeians in mid-tier, women and slaves high in shadow. Rome arranged empathy by altitude. The higher your seat, the safer your conscience. The priests, bound by scruple, could not spill blood inside the sacred boundary of the pomerium. So, they rewrote law to preserve the illusion of sanctity. When a Vestal virgin broke her vow, she could not be executed, yet she must die. Solution: entomb her alive beneath the city, with a lamp, bread, and a prayer, leaving judgment to the gods. A masterpiece of hypocrisy, death disguised as piety. Rome was obsessed with form, not mercy. To violate ritual offended heaven. To bury a woman alive did not. In the arithmetic of devotion, procedure cleansed guilt. The body became theology's loophole. Philosophers lent rhetoric to the cruelty. Stoics argued that pain refined the soul. If virtue came through endurance, then torture was moral education. They cited reason while the amphitheater demonstrated it. Even moral philosophy served logistics, words reinforcing wounds. The amphitheater did not merely punish, it instructed. Spectators were drilled to feel on cue. Horror, relief, satisfaction. Musicians below the stands synchronized emotion with rhythm. Every drumbeat aligned with impact. Every silence marked anticipation. The result was neurological choreography, thousands breathing as one organism. Augustine tells of his friend Alypius, who vowed to keep his eyes shut at the games. When the crowd roared, curiosity cracked his resolve. He looked and was changed. He left the arena addicted. Rome had discovered the nervous system as an instrument of rule. The spectacle taught citizens that their gaze completed justice. The emperor did not kill alone. The crowd's attention was his accomplice. To look was to belong. To turn away was treason. By midday, cruelty wore the mask of art. Executions became fatal charades, reenactments of myth. A woman bound to a bull became Pasiphae. A bandit torn apart played Orpheus. The gods were co-opted to legitimate policy. Poets like Martial boasted that the Flavian amphitheatre made the old stories true. The audience learned to see murder as memory, justice as repetition. To kill with meaning is easier than to kill with law. Myth anesthetized conscience. A citizen could leave saying not "we murdered," but "we worshipped." That confusion, sacred violence disguised as theatre, was Rome's cruelest invention. Above the sand, the emperor's pulvinar framed power as perspective. Hidden tunnels delivered him unseen until he chose visibility. When he appeared, 50,000 rose. His stillness dictated tempo. His gesture rewrote fate. Even silence became command. The seating plan was moral architecture. Senators closest to blood, foreigners at the rim. Every sightline was a social contract. From the emperor's box to the lowest bench, everyone participated in one rhythm. Submission disguised as spectacle. Rome's cruelty persisted because it was participatory. No tyrant could sustain it alone. The crowd carried the rhythm, merchants the profit, poets the justification. All believed they preserved civilization. To question the games was to question Rome itself. Tertullian later called the amphitheatre a rival altar. Incense, music, sacrifice. Only the god appeased was the crowd. His essay, De Spectaculis, reads like an exorcism. Words meant to purge an addiction. But by then, cruelty had become habit. The amphitheatre no longer shocked, it soothed. Citizens left calmer than they arrived, cleansed by someone else's agony. Rome's genius was to make cruelty feel normal, administrative, inevitable, and so the question deepens. No empire lasts forever, but habits do. By the 4th century, the amphitheatres began to crumble, not from outrage, but from arithmetic. Lions were costly, loyalty cheaper elsewhere. As treasuries thinned, emperors discovered morality. They issued decrees limiting excessive shows, declaring virtue while counting savings. Christian bishops thundered, accountants quietly nodded. Rome's moral awakening was an austerity measure. The end was not cinematic, it was bureaucratic. A law capped festival spending, another reduced the number of gladiators, a third banned executions for decency, each clause less about compassion than balance sheets. But the sand grew quiet. To dignify decline, legend supplied a hero. A monk leaping into the arena to stop a fight, his death melting an emperor's heart. The tale comforts us because it promises redemption. In truth, cruelty faded the way power always does, through exhaustion and neglect. Even after the gates closed, the amphitheatre lived on in miniature. Mosaics depicted hunters Beasts, heroes, violence reframed as virtue. Oil lamps bore gladiator motifs beside household gods. Children played with wooden swords. Parents quoted Marshall at dinner. Violence became decor, cruelty aestheticized into pattern. That is the most dangerous form of memory, the kind that flatters the crime it preserves. Writers warned that what delights the eyes, the heart repeats. But repetition was the point. The amphitheater was never only stone, it was a curriculum. A culture that beautifies suffering will not easily unlearn it. North of the Forum, near the Colline Gate, lay Campus Celeratus, the field of evil. Here, Vestal virgins who failed their vows were buried alive, their deaths renamed devotion. Archaeological reports align with ancient coordinates. The place existed. Each ritual there was an act of denial wrapped in ceremony. The pontiffs recited prayers as the ladder withdrew. A lamp, a loaf, a drop of oil, symbols of divine judgment, disguising murder as faith. The earth swallowed the city's guilt. When the soil was tamped flat, Rome congratulated itself for having avoided bloodshed. That, perhaps, is the most Roman sentence of all. For a city terrified of chaos, appearance mattered more than morality. The equation was simple: one buried body for a year of civic calm. In that math, cruelty was not failure, it was efficiency. Centuries later, the Colosseum became ruin, relic, museum. Tourists trace the same path the condemned once walked. Guides speak of arches, not arteries, structure, not suffering. Distance masquerades as progress. But scroll through any digital feed, and the choreography reappears. A public shaming unfolds with algorithmic precision. One clip, one face, millions of witnesses. The crowd no longer fills stone benches, it scrolls. The roar is silent, the cruelty clean. Every share, every comment is a digital thumb turned down. Rome's spectacle has changed platform, not principle. We call it justice. Metrics call it engagement. And behind both lies the same logic. Emotion monetized, humiliation repackaged as virtue. The amphitheater now fits in a pocket, portable, silent, profitable. So who decided that humiliation could be sacred? Everyone who found comfort in watching it. In Rome, power required witnesses. In ours, it requires views. Both convert attention into authority. The empire's greatest invention was not concrete or law, but consent. The willingness of the many to find meaning in another's suffering. Its collapse did not erase that grammar, it exported it. Every civilization that values order over mercy rebuilds the amphitheater, even if it's made of pixels. History rarely grants absolution, but it does reveal arithmetic. The amphitheater ran on 3 fuels: fear, spectacle, silence. Fear built the gates. Spectacle filled the seats. Silence kept the schedule. It ended only when enough citizens stayed home. Not one monk, not one decree, but 1,000 quiet refusals. That is how cruelty dies, not with revolution, but with absence. An empty bench is protest. Averted eyes can dismantle a regime, walk again through the ruins at dusk. The light slides across marble like confession. Every stone still holds the mathematics of pain. Cost, distance, visibility. The arches frame absence, the sand remembers weight. The woman who once walked the forum, paraded, cut open slowly, was neither martyr nor monster. She was an entry in a civic spreadsheet, proof the system worked. But beneath the tourist chatter, the ledger still whispers. It lists not numbers, but choices. The guard who tightened the chain, the vendor who sold figs, the poet who turned pain to verse, the spectator who clapped because everyone else did. Power survives by repetition. Memory resists by naming. So, let her be singular again. One woman, one morning, one city mistaking punishment for prayer. When triumphs are tallied, may no one's silence be the coin that pays for them. And when the ledger closes, the bones still speak. They always will.